In configuring tape storage and media, we will verify that the tape devices are visible to the operating system of the NetBackup master server system. We will configure tape devices and storage units using the Configure Storage Device wizard. We'll verify that the tape devices and storage units are configured. We will configure some additional volume pools, as well as perform robot inventory operations to create barcode rules and media ID generation rules. We will verify that the volumes in the volume pools have been configured properly. Let's first take a look at the device manager. We'll open up the server manager and underneath the device manager section. In here we can see we have a medium changer. We'll click the plus next to the medium changer to show what type of medium changers are being seen by the operating system. And here we can see in our lab environment we have an 8x scalar 1000 library. If I highlight the entry, we can right click and we can choose properties. From the properties window, we can find out the device type, the manufacturer, and the location. The location is what the operating system is using to function with this device. So here we can see it's using bus number 0, target ID is 0, and the LUN is 0. And the device status from Windows is the device is working properly. If I go up to drivers, you can get driver information about this medium changer, as well as the details tab will give detailed information about this medium changer. We'll select cancel. Next, let's take a look at the tape drives that the operating system can see. Underneath the tape drives, we see that we actually have two different tape devices. The ones that have been configured for our lab environment is the Quantum Super DLT1. If I highlight the first one, we can right-click, again, and choose Properties, and the Properties window for this tape device will show. From the General tab, we can see the device type, the manufacturer, and again, the location. In this case, it's using bus 0, target 0, and LUN number 1. And the device status, the Windows operating system says that the device is working properly. We can show the tape symbolic name. On here, it's just Windows presents it as tape 0. And typically the second device that will show up in here we can take a look at, but usually that will show up as tape 1. And again, there's the driver tab. We can select the driver tab to pull up information about the device drivers and then detailed information about this particular device. We'll select cancel. And real quickly, we'll take a look at the second device on here. We can right click and choose properties. And again, in here, we can see all the information from general. Again, the tape symbolic name in this case, it is tape number 1. And the driver information. And then details. And we'll select cancel. So as long as the operating system can see these devices, that means that NetBackup is pretty much good to go. So we will go ahead and minimize this screen here, and we will open up the NetBackup Administration Console, and I'll just maximize the screen here to view this. So in order for us to configure these devices, the easiest way to do this is from the wizard console. And the way you access the wizards inside NetBackup is it's always from the tree view at the very top. It's the master server, the host name, which will always get you back to all the wizards. So in here, it's the second wizard down, which is configure our storage devices. So I'm going to select the configure storage device, which we get welcome to the device configuration wizard screen, and we will select next to begin this process. The first screen that's going to show up is all the different device hosts for this. So on here, we're going to configure tape devices for our Win Master server and then for the Win Media server. I'm going to deselect the Win server entry since I know there is not any devices associated with that host. You will obviously need to select things in your own environment when working with that. We'll select next to continue. So as it's running through scanning each one of the hosts, we can see for Win Master, it is scanning the devices and it's detected 2 tape drives and 1 robot, or our 1 medium changer in this case. And then for the Win Media server, it also says it's detected 2 tape drive paths and 1 robot. Now I know for our lab environment that our virtual tape library, the VTL host, has 1 robot and 2 tape drives associated with this, but we are actually setting up a shared storage option, or commonly known as SSO environment. So even though we really only have one medium changer and 2 physical tape drives with this, both those systems have been zoned so that both the master server and the media server think that they own and operate this. Later on in other lessons, we will explain how NetBackup can control that. Let's select Next. So the next screen shows us our SAN clients. We do not have any SAN clients in our lab environment, so we will bypass the screen by selecting Next. So here it's actually showing us our backup devices. So again, we've got the ADIC Scalar 1000. We can highlight this, and again, we can go to the Properties button to view more property information about this. And we can see here that the remote host for this is winmedia.example.com, which means the master server technically has access and owns and operates this device, but the WinMedia server has the ability to ask the master server for ability to move the medium changer around. We'll select Cancel. And here too, down towards the bottom, we can actually see that here's our host name. So both these hosts here can actually see that one device, and you'll be able to see now that the master server actually has port 3, bus 0, target 0, and LUN, the device path, but the media server does not. So anytime that the media server needs to request a tape to get mounted or unmounted, it will have to send a command over to the master server to be able to get that done. If we highlight the first tape drive on here, this Quantum Super DLT, in this case we can actually see again that the 2 hosts, the media server and the master server, both have device access to this, and the same thing, they just so happen to have the same port, bus, target, and LUN associated with that. We can also select the Properties button from within here and show you specific information, the serial number, the drive number for this, the drive type that NetBackup is associating with this. And we'll select Cancel. If we select the second tape device and select Properties, again here too we can see that this is the second drive in here, and a lot of that is supported through the serialization and the serial numbers associated that we've queried off of that tape library. We'll select Cancel. So now that you've confirmed everything is correct, you can select the Next button. On here we can see it's the drag and drop configuration. This is pretty critical. At this point in time, if your devices support serialization, NetBackup should be able to actually put the drives in the correct order along with the robot. So on here on drive number 1, we can see that that is the name of it, the quantum.superdlt1.000. On drive number 2, we can see quantum.superdlt1.001. This is the order. Again, if you wanted to view property information, you can highlight the specific drive or device and select the Properties button for this. If your devices do not support serialization or NetBackup's having a hard time configuring that, your drives may show up under the standalone drives. If they're in a library, please do not ignore this. You will need to actually highlight the drive in the standalone section and drag that up underneath the appropriate robot. Otherwise, NetBackup will not be able to utilize drives that are in a library that have been marked as standalone in NetBackup. We'll select Next. So at this point, we're taking a look at that the device configuration changes need to be committed. In order to commit these changes, we need to cycle the device manager service. This is basically asking you if you want to commit these changes and cycle this device manager service. We'll select Yes to continue. So as we're waiting for the progress to come through here, you can see that it's committing any of those changes and that it is restarting the device manager on the Windows Master Server and on the Windows Media Server. Now that it's finished, we will select Next. Lastly, we're going to come to the storage unit configuration. So now that we've actually told NetBackup that these devices, these physical devices, actually exist, in order for NetBackup to utilize these devices, we actually need to have something called a storage unit associated with it, and that's that logical grouping of devices, attaching this logical entity or name to that device. So with this being said, we're going to go in and change the naming of the storage unit to make it something a little bit more meaningful than what NetBackup comes up with. So let's select the Properties button. By selecting the Properties button, the storage unit screen is going to appear. So notice we don't get to change much from here, but we do get to change a little bit. So on here, I'm just going to name this tape_STU for storage unit, and then when master, again, in your own environment, you'll want to come up with your own naming conventions. Just make sure that you've got something meaningful for your own environment. So we can verify the information. Here's our media server, which just so happens to be the master server. And because we will have 2 write drives in this, 2 drives here, we'll keep that as the 2 drives, and we'll select OK. So while it's changing the information, we can see it now shows the different name that we typed in. We'll highlight the second storage unit and select Properties as well, so we can get into the screen and change that, and we'll name that tape_STU_win media. So we have that associated with the media server. And again, you can verify that the correct media server for this is the Win media server. And we'll select OK. And now that we have our storage unit names set up the way that we want them, we can select Next, which will commit these changes into the database for NetBackup, and we should end up with a finished screen. And we'll select Finish. Let's go take a look at the verifying of our work for configuring our robot and our devices. One of the first areas we'll get into is underneath the tree view on the left-hand side of the screen. We see Media and Device Management. Let's go underneath the devices. I'll select the Expand button for that. And underneath devices, we can select Robots. So we can see that 2 robots, technically logically configured, because there really is only 1 robot, are appearing underneath the robot section. They both have the same exact name. But we can see underneath Win Master, we find out some information about the serial number and who the robot control host is, and then the path to actually get to that medium changer. So I can right click and I can choose to change just to show you the information on what was captured. In here we can see the device host is grayed out. You can choose to a different type of robot if you would like. We have the DLT, or the TLD is what it gets named, Tape Library DLT type. We automatically start at robot 0 in an environment, and then the name you don't get to choose. NetBackup will do that for you based on the robot type and the robot number. We do have 3 options for our robotic control. So as we can see, since this actually is associated with the master server, it will be the robot is controlled locally by this device host. For our media server, we'll show you how it will automatically select the second option, which is robot control is handled by a remote host, because the media server does not have direct access to this. And then lastly, we have an option for robot is controlled and attached to an NDMP host. So if you do choose the first radio dial, you will actually have to enter in a path for this. If you're going to do this manually. NetBackup did that for you via the wizard. We can select Browse just so you can see what that looks like. And all the information appears in here. So this is where you'd want to double check. If you're trying to add a robot yourself and this information is not showing up in here, you'd want to double check to make sure that the operating system can actually see it as well. If the operating system can see it, yet this NetBackup GUI cannot. Sometimes it has to do with a firmware issue. We'll select Cancel. All right, so here we'll select Cancel to get out of this window. And let's go take a look at the media server side because it's slightly different. We'll right-click and choose Change. So when we open up the Change console for the robot, we can see that the device host for this is the media server. We still have the same robot, robot number, and robot name. But now we've got the second radio dial because the media server, again, does not have direct access. So it's basically this little icon here off to the left-hand side. That's our media server. So anytime it has to mount a tape or unmount a tape, it has to send a command to the master server to do that, since that's the direct connection. And then, of course, it's always going to ask you what's the robot control host name that it can issue the commands for that. And we don't have the device path because that's not associated with this host. We'll select Cancel. Next, let's go take a look at the drives. So under the 2 drives that we configured, we can see the first one here. Again, this is our Quantum Super DLT1. It does have multiple device hosts. So as we're highlighting this, we can look down towards the bottom half of the screen, which is going to display drive path information. So in here we can see there's the drive name, and we do have two separate hosts for this. One is our media server, Win Media Server, and the other one is our Win Master. And again, they both just happen to have the same exact path, the same port, the same bus, target, and LUN. And of course, we'll have the same serial number because that's the serial number associated with that specific device, that drive. And here you can see there's multiple paths, multiple ports for this. It won't display each one of them. If we highlight the second drive on here too, it's the same exact information that will show up. I can right-click and I can show you on the change just so you can see what that looks like in here by diving in to this. This is how you would actually add additional devices, drives if you want, or delete them. But here you can see that here's our two hosts to this particular drive. Be cautious when you're creating new drives into the NetBackup environment that if they are in a library, make sure that you choose the checkbox. The drive is in a robotic library. Otherwise, NetBackup will think that it's a standalone device. And then choose the appropriate library in whichever drive number. Now, all this information is pre-created because we actually went through the device configuration wizard for that. And we'll select cancel. And lastly, we got into was creating storage units for this, and that is up the tree view a little bit. It's under the NetBackup management, and then underneath the storage category, we'll choose storage units. So sure enough, in here are our two storage units. If I highlight the first one, we right-click, select change. The window should look pretty familiar with what we ended up changing the storage unit name to. Now, you're not allowed to change the storage unit name. If you needed to do that, you would have to delete it and re-add it, and that's perfectly fine in NetBackup. You can choose a different type of storage device. There's several different available, depending on what kind of devices that you have already pre-created in your own environment. And then, of course, which media server has access to this device. And then, of course, how many drives are available that you would want NetBackup to utilize or have the opportunity for. We'll get into reduced fragment size and multiplexing in a later lab session. We'll select cancel. Let's take a look at our volume pools. Volume and media and tape information can be found underneath the Media and Device Management tree view under Media. So we'll open the Media section, and from here we can click on the volume pools. Underneath volume pools, we can see the 4 default volume pools. There's the None pool, typically set over for the cleaning tapes. The NetBackup pool, if you don't do anything configuration for NetBackup, all the new pieces of media or tapes get dumped into the NetBackup volume pool. We have Data Store, which is typically for your third-party applications, and then your Catalog Backup pool, which is where all the tapes will go for any of your catalog backups. So in order to create new pools in NetBackup, all we have to do is right-click, and we'll select New, and we get our new pool, new volume pool dialog box available. So we're going to create a scratch pool. So we'll do scratch underscore tapes, and then we can put scratch pool in here. Now, what makes a scratch pool is by selecting the checkbox for the scratch pool. So it really doesn't make any difference as to what you actually name the pool. I just put scratch underscore tapes in here, but you could list it as scratch pool, you could list it as extra tapes. So you just really need to make sure that you choose the checkbox to make that pool act as a scratch pool. So we'll select OK. Next, we're going to create another one just to kind of show you, again, what that can look like on a regular one. So we might have one called server tapes underneath here, and then we'll just put 4 backups. And really, you don't have to have any extra pools in here. It's just more for administration help than anything else. I'm going to create one for duplicate underscore tapes and put 4 multiple backups. So be cautious on how many pools you do end up creating, because again, there's probably a fine line between creating too many and then possibly not enough. Again, really depending on your own environment. So in here we can, do a sort underneath a number. So you can see the first 4 were already there. Those were the default ones once you install NetBackup. And then the next few, the scratch tapes we created, and then the server tapes, and then the duplicate tapes pool that we have here. And now underneath the scratch section, you can see exactly which one is deemed as scratch if your volume pool name is not obvious enough. And same thing for the catalog. It's only recommended to have one volume pool for catalog, and same thing for scratch. So once you already have a scratch volume pool deemed as scratch, you won't be able to create an additional one. So let's go take a look at putting media or volumes into these pools here. So we're going to go into the volume configuration wizard. And again, to get back to the wizards, we just need to choose the host name, the master server host name in the tree view. And we kind of get back to all of our different wizards available. About halfway down the page, we're going to choose configure volumes. Here's our welcome screen, and we'll select next. And now it's going to ask you which media server do you want to configure the volumes on, and we'll just choose the Win Master, and you need to choose the robot that you would like to inventory. So if you have multiple different libraries in your environment, you'll have to run through this a few different times to select each one of those libraries. We're just going to run through this once here on the master. So I'll select the medium changer, the library for this, and we'll select next. Now this is another screen that's going to pop up talking about specifying if you have multiple drive types in a library. So, for their example that they're giving you here is if you have a robot that has a Quantum DLT 7000 and it has Quantum DLT 8000s, you will need to tell NetBackup which tapes you want to utilize in the DLT 7000 and which tapes you want to be able to utilize in the DLT 8000. Only because once those tapes have been written to DLT 8000, the 7000 really can't read that technology. So it's kind of hard when you have 2 different drive types in a library. So just be cautious of that. That's basically what this is asking you. And the default is yes. There are drives in the robot that are not of DLT type 3, which is what got configured when we went through our device configuration. In our case, all of the drives in the robot and the medium changer or the library are all of the same type. So I'm going to choose no, that everything's exactly the same. And we'll select next. So in here, there are some things. The very first time you set up a configuration, you want to set up some certain advanced options in here. And so we're going to kind of cover that up front. So we'll click on advanced options. And this brings you to your robot inventory screen, which we need to select advanced options again to get at the tabs that I'm looking for. There are 3 tabs that run across the top. There's media settings, barcode rules, and media ID generation rules. The one that's really only used for a one-time use is the media settings. And you can set up kind of media settings to just function for this one time you're going to run through the robot inventory. If you want these rules to apply every time you run a robot inventory, which is pretty typical what most customers set up, you want to configure your barcode rules and or your media ID generation rules. So let's select the barcode rules. On the barcode rules, we're going to select new. You'll notice that there aren't any to begin with. Nothing comes configured with NetBackup, so we'll need to set this up. And typically customers will set up cleaning tapes. So when they put cleaning tapes in their library and then they inventory the library, those will automatically get tagged as cleaning tapes and not cartridge tapes. And how the cleaning barcode or the barcode tag works is it works from the left to the right. So the CLN in this particular instance that I wrote here, it would have to be the first 3 characters on the left-hand side of the barcode. Next, it defaults to 25 cleanings, and here the media type, it's defaulting to DTF cleaning tape, but if you recall, our devices we created were DLT3, so we need to go find DLT and then there's cleaning tape 3. That's what we'd have to select. Now be cautious because there's, a slight difference between cartridge tape and cleaning. We need to make sure that we're choosing cleaning tape. So we'll select the DLT3 cleaning tape, and then if you want, you can put a description for cleaning drives if we wanted to, and then we can click on OK. So in this particular instance, now we've set up anytime we do a robot inventory and it comes up and it sees that the barcode tag is CLN, it will automatically deem that tape as a DLT3 cleaning type tape. If I created a new barcode rule, maybe I want all new media to get dumped into the scratch pool. So I may not care, what the barcode is for this. I'm actually going to go to the media type. In this case, I really need to pick out DLT cartridge on here. So here's DLT cartridge tape 3. Again, it's pretty critical that we don't choose DLT cartridge tape or DLT cartridge tape 2 because we don't have any drives that have been created for just cartridge, DLT drive or DLT2 type drive. We've only created them for DLT3. So this is pretty critical. And notice the cleaning actually changed to max mounts. And I also have the opportunity now to choose the volume pool. And in this case, I might want to dump again everything into the scratch tapes pool. I'll just put scratch tapes. Put extra tapes. Doesn't really matter what your description is, then we can click on OK. So I have two rules. So the first one is anytime it runs across the CLN, it will dump everything into, the DLT cleaning 3 type. And then all the rest of them, so regardless of what the barcode tag sees on that, it will dump all the rest of them as a DLT type 3, and we'll put that into the scratch tapes pool. And it just shows you the pool number. So you might, if you looked back in underneath the volume pool section, you can look and see exactly what volume pool 4 is associated with. All right, so the next area we're going to get into is media ID generation rules. And notice again, we haven't any rules off of a brand new configuration, but you can add these. And we'll select new to open up a new rule. Basically what this does is a lot of the tapes today have very long barcodes. NetBackup can only track on its tape 6 characters. So even though some of these tapes comes with 13 or 15 long barcode characters, NetBackup's only going to take the right most 6 characters. That's it. So if one ever comes across that's not unique, that label can't get added into NetBackup, or you might want the first couple of characters to the left and then the rest of them off to the right. You would have to tell NetBackup you want to do that. Now, the different thing about the media ID generation from the barcode is notice the media ID generation, it's on a per robot and a per barcode length. So even if you, like in our instance, we only have one robot in here, but if I had multiple different barcode lengths in my library, I'd have to set up a different rule for each one of those. Now, I just so happen to know that the barcode links associated with our VTL, our virtual tape library, happens to have 8 characters in them. So I'll need to choose 8 because you need to let NetBackup know how many, barcode links, characters can that handle. And I know I want to stick with everything on the right-hand side. So in that case, I'd actually have to list it as 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8 is listed here. So this would take, again, normally you wouldn't even have to set this rule up because this is exactly what NetBackup would do, is the rightmost 6 characters. But some of the, for example, they're giving you here is like a £N, which means replace the first character with an N, and then whatever placeholder 2, 3, 4, 5 is, go ahead and put those placeholders in instead of those numbers. So that's kind of one of these examples. Now, say I had a barcode of 10 characters in my library. This rule, by setting up this rule, would not apply to those. So it would be going back to, the old methodology unless I went and created a new media ID generation rule with the 10 character barcode length. So we'll select OK. And here we have this created. So we'll select OK again to get out of the screen, and we get brought back to the robot inventory. We can select Start to start this inventory. And we can see the progress of this. It's logically added this new media. It's found exactly what it's looking for, and it's telling you exactly the robot and then what slot it is in here. Now the Windows version of this, we can see down towards the bottom, it asks us, do we want to update the volume configuration? So basically, here it's showing you this is what I'm going to logically add. Now do you really want me to commit those changes? So here we'll select yes. And so it's kind of coming through and saying that it's successfully committed those changes, and we can select close. And it brings us back to our volume configuration wizard. Now, if you wanted to configure more volumes, you can select the button for configure more volumes, but if you're finished, then we can click on the finish button here and get out. So you can always get back into the volume configuration wizard to rerun through anything of that all over again. Let's verify our handiwork. We will select media, and underneath media, we can get in here and we can see the media that was added. I'm going to hit the refresh button and see. Sometimes the media takes a little bit, and you might actually have to select view. And there's two different refreshes. There's refresh and refresh all. So if a normal refresh doesn't work, you might want to choose a refresh all. And that will actually go back out and re-query the database for that. The refresh kind of does a delta refresh for this. So, and just to let you know that this little icon here on the menu bar, that is a delta refresh. It's not a refresh all option. So here's our media ID. This is what actually will get placed on the tape. And here is our given barcode. So we can see that it was definitely the 8 characters long here. And the media type, the robot number, who has got the control, it's the master server, the slot that this is for. The volume group is dictated by wherever, your hardware for that. Again, that's a kind of a logical, you take it out of the library and there's no volume group, it's the none. And then because we set up that barcode rule, all of our tapes were dumped into the Scratch tapes pool. If we had not set up that barcode rule, then all those volume pools, tapes would have gone into the NetBackup volume pool. That's the default. Now, no, if you have existing media in your environment and you go to create a barcode rule, that existing media will not get moved into the new volume pool. You would have to do that manually for this. So just a heads up for that.